Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time to join us today for our Lunch and Learn on the topic of increasing a sense of belonging among college students. My name is Simone Figueroa, and I am the president of You Thrive Educational Services. And for those of you who we've not had the opportunity of partnering with, we are an organization that provides proactive mental and emotional wellness curriculum to help college students manage stress, become more resilient, and thrive throughout their undergraduate experiences and beyond. I am so excited to be joined today by one of our esteemed key contributors, Dr. Nidia Ruedas-Gracia. And before I turn it over to Dr. Nidia, I'm going to share a little bit about her with you all. So Dr. Nidia Ruedas-Gracia is an assistant professor of educational psychology at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Research in her lab, the Gracia Lab, seeks to develop a nuanced understanding of what it means to belong and how this sense of belonging impacts life outcomes such as academic performance and mental health. Together with her research team, she focuses on exploring these concepts among culturally diverse populations and examining how sense of belonging is associated with various social identities such as gender, race and ethnicity, socioeconomic status, etc. So I could not think of a better suited guest to join us today to talk about this topic. And without further ado, I will turn it on over.
Thank you so much, Simone, for the awesome introduction. So I'll go ahead and share my slides now. Alrighty. Okay. All right. So thank you again, Simone, for the wonderful introduction. I'm here to present all about helping college students increase their sense of belonging. I have quite a few things to talk about. And also I'm excited to present some of our actual brand new findings from a article right about just about this topic that is currently in press. So it was just published, and feel free to email me or reach out to me if you want a copy of the actual article, but we'll talk about it today. All right, so here is the agenda. So I'm actually gonna use my stopwatch as well because I can talk for hours, but we don't have hours, we have a few minutes. So I'm going to time myself. All right, so first I'm going to talk a little bit about myself in addition to the intro that was just given. And then I'll talk a little bit about sense of belonging and what it is. So its definition and how it operates differently for different types of people. And then we'll talk about actually how do we foster it. So we'll talk about real kind of applied ideas as to how to foster it. And then because I'm timing myself, if I do it right, we'll have a few minutes for a Q&A as well. Okay, so about me. Again, I'm an assistant professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I identify as Mexican American, and when I was in college, I was a first generation low-income college student. And I think that those two identities really color and inform the way that I do my work and the way that I've gone through academia for all of these years. I'm also from Los Angeles, California, and so a little bit heartbroken about the Lakers losing yesterday, but it's okay. We're going to pick right back up and be great next season. Also extremely family oriented, and so I've put this photo of me and my mom on my 30th birthday. She gave me that tiara to wear. And it's just kind of a signal that throughout my educational experience, I've also included my family in it, and not just having them attend graduations or events, but also they help inform what decisions I make and what schools I go to and what majors I pick and what kind of research to do. So they're very much in it with me. And then an about me would not be complete without some social media handles. So if you want to learn more about the work that I do, you can go to ruedasgracia.com. I also periodically post cool things on Instagram and Twitter. So if you follow me at nrgracia, you'll get to see those posts and also motivate me to post more. So you can follow me there. Research-wise, I focus on two big things. The first one is that I explore sociocultural factors that impact academic performance and psychological well-being among culturally diverse groups. And so one of those sociocultural factors is sense of belonging, which we'll focus on today. And then I want to use that work, whatever I find in that first strand of work, to inform and develop culturally sustaining interventions for minoritized groups. So I want to improve their life outcomes, and I want to use my research to do that. All right, so like I mentioned, one of these sociocultural factors is sense of belonging. So I wanted to start right off the bat with sense of belonging and its definition. So generally, sense of belonging is the experience of personal involvement in a system or environment so that persons feel themselves to be an integral part of that system or environment. Let's kind of think through that. All right. Sense of belonging generally is important for well-being, motivation, and academic performance. And you can also have sense of belonging to different contexts. So you can have a sense of belonging to your school. Sometimes when we think of like K through 12 education, we can think of sense of school belonging, belonging to the actual school that you go to. We can also have sense of belonging to college. So, past K through 12, you can have a sense of belonging to your actual university or college that you are attending. And so that's probably what we're most interested in as a group today. You can also have a sense of belonging to your country. So we have some work in preparation where we explore how people think of their sense of belonging to their country and how it impacts the way that they kind of make decisions and behave in this world. You can also have a sense of belonging to your race or ethnicity. And so we have a paper out as well where we focus on, what is sense of belonging to your race? What does that mean, your sense of belonging to your ethnicity? So you can have a bunch of different sense of belongings to different parts of your world. And I think that's important to realize because for today, we're going to focus on sense of belonging to college, right? And so we want to think about sense of belonging to college. And sense of belonging to college is students' perceived social support on campus, a feeling or sensation of connectedness, the experience of mattering or feeling cared about, accepted, respected, valued, and important to the group or others on campus. And so I wanted to do a quick activity. Now that we're honing into sense of college belonging, I'm assuming, and maybe it's a bad assumption, but I'm assuming that most of us in this group today have gone to some form of college, whether that be community college or a four-year institution or any kind of technical program. So you've been in the college setting. So I want you to, take a trip back down memory lane, and I'll give about a minute of silence. So don't be alarmed if it's silent. But I want you to take a moment and think about a time where you did feel like you belonged at that college. So for example, I went to college in my undergrad at UCLA. And so for this next minute, I'll think about like, okay, at UCLA when I was there, what were some moments where I felt like I really belonged at that college, at that university? So think about that. And if you feel comfortable, drop it in the chat. And it can just be a couple of sentences, just a quick moment where you felt a sense of belonging. Type it in the chat, post it over to us so we can see it. And it doesn't even have to be fully formed sentences. It could just be some quick moments. And yes, we'll get that article over to you. I saw in the chat that some of y'all want the copy. Awesome. Yes, keep throwing them in the chat. I can see them already. Nice. So we have, while I worked at a tutoring center, a sorority, when the professor knew your home, ooh, being a research assistant, when it felt like home, part of a Latino student group, working with others, sharing meals, getting involved in a student group, Freshmen rush the field before the first home game. That's awesome. Student government. Got a few RAs in here. A class that you excelled in. Volunteering, meeting best friends. Thank you all so much. Yes, these are all amazing. I see a lot around professors, joining organizations. More professors, lunch with friends, lunch with instructors, dorm life, going to events on campus or parties or gatherings. Thank you all so much. These are amazing. Okay, so, establishing a Divine Nine organization at the institution. And for those of you who don't know, Divine Nine is the 9 fraternities and sororities affiliated with Black African American culture. See, you took a class on youth identity and self, mentoring new students. Okay, so amazing. The activity worked because I encourage y'all to scroll through others' answers, because what you're going to see there is that they resemble or they embody the words that I italicized in this definition. So italicized are words like social support. So meeting your friends, having a group that you could have meals with, all of that, having a support network, having lunch with instructors, that all is part of that social support. A feeling a sense of connectedness. So being able to establish a Divine Nine organization at your institution, being connected in that way to other people. Um, Again, the sharing meals or, hanging out with a professor, being a research assistant and being important to connectedness in that research lab, or being an RA in a dorm and being very important to that connectedness in that dorm. You have mattering, so the sense of you mattering within that institution, being accepted and respected and valued, and being important to the group, right? So all of these examples are perfect examples of these italicized words. And so the reason why I wanted to hold on this slide and on this activity is because sometimes when you're thinking, how can I foster belonging? And we'll get to that later, but oftentimes going back to the definition is really helpful, because then you can ask yourself, how can I make this student feel accepted and respected? Or does this student or does this group have social support on campus? And if they don't, how can we start making that happen? How can we have them have access to this social support? So sometimes going back to the definition is great. So I want to spend a bit of time on this definition. All right. So just like sense of general belonging is important for a lot of things, sense of college belonging is also important for a lot of things, like degree persistence, college graduation, psychological well-being. So it's really important to focus on this. And I think, y'all know this because we're in this Zoom room together. So we know that it's important. So a couple of things that I wanted to point out, and I'll try to be quick on this. So this is this is some of the findings from the new paper that we just had published. So if you read through the whole paper, you'll get a better sense of what I'm speeding through today. But I wanted to bring our attention to it because it'll maybe inform the way that we actually foster a sense of belonging. All right, so oftentimes you measure sense of belonging and then you increase it via an intervention, and then that's it. We kind of think of sense of belonging as stable, but there's a lot of new research coming out that hypothesizes that it might actually change over time. So it might be kind of like a roller coaster situation where it goes up and down depending on different things that happen in college. And so sometimes it's an intervention that raises it, but it might be just something that happens in your normal life. And anecdotally, as you all mentioned in the chat, there can be a lot of things that can happen here and there that can increase it or decrease it. And importantly, some of the questions that I ask is, does it change for everyone in the same way? So for example, first generation college students, does their roller coaster look very up and down versus non-first gen, maybe their roller coaster looks a little less bumpy. How about for people who identify as women? How about for those who identify as different races or ethnicities? And so that's kind of the, this photo of the big roller coaster. It's probably from Six Flags or something, but your roller coaster can look different depending on what different identities that you identify with. And to take it up a notch as well, something that I also wanted to make sure that I talked about today is that it's not only different identities, but how they intersect that can also inform the way that you experience your belonging in college and the way that you can be supported. So let me quickly explain this figure, which we also have in that paper. So we explain it fully there. But let's imagine that this is a flower. So hopefully it looks like a flower to you. We worked really hard on this. Um, and let's pretend that this flower is one individual. So you see petals on this flower. Some of the petals are dashed, some of them are solid, some of them are light gray, some of them are darker gray. Um, and in the center at the bottom, you have this circle, right? And so that's like the center of the flower, the center of the individual. And then in these color, like the grayscale petals, you see that they overlap with each other, and the overlap is a little bit darker than the original petals. And you also see these letters. So RGS. We are saying that R stands for race in this flower, G stands for gender identity, and S stands for socioeconomic status. So the point that we were trying to make with this figure specifically is that each individual has different petals. They have different social identities. Race, gender, and socioeconomic status is some of them, but there are also other social identities that one individual can embody. And these social identities overlap, just like these petals overlap. And so you might, you might have an experience, and you experience it in terms of your race, right? Or you can experience something in terms of your gender identity. You can also experience something in terms of your race and gender. So, for example, if you identify as Black and you identify as a woman, you will experience certain things in college differently because of being a Black woman that you can't really separate as, oh, I experienced this because I identify as Black versus a woman. It kind of goes together and it informs it differently than, say, a Black man or a white woman, right? And so that's what we tried to describe with this flower, is that we embody different identities and they overlap and they inform the way that we experience college. And they also inform the way that interventions can work for us, right? So, for example, we have some examples in the chat about Divine Nine, right? A D9 sorority or a D9 fraternity. So those can function as interventions in two ways. They are specifically for, or the origins are, the history of it is for students who identify as Black. But a D9 sorority would be students who identify as Black and women. And so that organization in of itself, it's, kind of this overlap here in these two petals. So it's addressing those two petals, and it can be a source of belonging for people who identify with those two different identities. So I'll bring back this image in a bit. Okay, so that Impress article, basically what we did is we had about 150 students, and it was over their 4 years of college. We measured them 3 times, so we almost yearly, basically. And we purposely tried to make sure that this sample was racially and ethnically diverse. So we tried our best, not perfect, but we tried our best. And it was a longitudinal study. So really what we wanted to know is, how does this roller coaster look? That's essentially what we wanted to do. What does that roller coaster look like? And does it look the same for every type of student with all of those petals in their flower? So really, really quickly, we saw that when you just looked at the petals separately, we saw that students identifying as female had lower university belonging than those who identified as male. Low-income students had lower university belonging than non-low-income students. White students had the highest university belonging at time 1 and time 2, and the second highest at time 3. Talk about that later. And then Black, Asian, Latino, and multi-ethnic students all experienced decreases in their university belonging over time. So we're already seeing that if we just look at the petals separately, we're already looking at differences, which we expected. Now let's bring back the flower, right? So I'll try to go really quickly here, but I'll try to be clear. So now we're looking at intersectional identities, and I put here initial levels. So we're talking about at time 1, right? So when they were freshmen, what we saw is female low-income students experienced lower levels of belonging than their male low-income peers. Okay, so we're starting to look at that intersection of gender and socioeconomic status. And we're seeing that female low-income participants experience lower levels than male low-income participants. And we saw this across all racial ethnic groups. So this might be helpful in terms of when we're talking about low-income students. Even within low-income students, they don't all have the same university belonging levels. There were differences by gender. More results here. Among African American and Latinx participants, females reported higher university belonging levels than their male peers. Among Asian and white participants, females reported lower university belonging than their male peers. So in terms of different race and ethnicities, gender differences looked a little bit different depending on what race or ethnicity that person identified with. We also have race and SES, so the difference in university belonging between low-income and non-low-income students was largest in the Latinx group compared to other racial and ethnic groups. So low-income Latinx participants experienced lower university belonging than their non-low-income Latinx peers. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful as well in terms of interactions. And there's even more, right? So now we're looking at rates of change. So we were looking at their freshman year. Now we're looking over time, how their sense of belonging changed. And we're seeing that female Latinx participants levels decreased much faster and increased much slower than their male Latinx peers. So they were highly likely to decrease, and it was harder to increase their sense of belonging. I'm going to zoom through this because I want to get to the last part. So low-income Latinx participants levels increased faster than low-income students in all other racial and ethnic groups. So in conclusion, this roller coaster looks different for different types of people, and especially when you're looking at the different petals and how they overlap. And it's not just their freshman year initial patterns, but also the way that it changes over time also was different. And so how do we foster it, right? Remember that it can change over time. So please remember that sense of belonging, as far as we know so far, may be more of a roller coaster than a stable type of thing. And so what that means, you might be overwhelmed and you're like, well, if it changes all the time, then how do we even foster it? Well, it's actually an opportunity to tailor interventions at different times in students' college careers. And you can also really use this idea of intersectional identities to really create a unique experience for different types of students. So we actually have more opportunities now to foster sense of belonging now that we know this information. So for example, those that we think can't catch up, right? Like their sense of belonging increases slower or they never quite get there in terms of their peers, we might want to intervene early. Orientation programs, first year experience, because we know that it's going to take them a longer time to catch up if they can to their peers. So let's intervene early at that first year. For those who can catch up, for those whose sense of belonging does increase at a fairly quick level, we can intervene early, but they also might benefit from intervening at later times. So there's, still hope for freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, we can do things throughout. And then also remember that flower, remember those petals. We can develop programming and spaces that really take into account these intersectional identities. And I know myself, and I knew that I was going to run out of time. So what I did here is I got some QR codes, but I can also send the links along if there's a way, or maybe with this recording we can send these links. But my colleagues and I wrote up these two different articles, and we have 10 rules for creating a sense of belonging. So on the left there, you'll see creating a sense of belonging in your research group. And you can adapt that. So it doesn't just have to be your research group, but it could be your different department or your group. You can kind of adapt some of the things that we talk about, some of the rules there. And then we have another one for successfully supporting first generation low income students in STEM. And so if that's kind of your bucket or where you are in your career, you can also read that. And so QR codes there, but also I can send off links in the best way possible. And one of those articles we have, this is kind of how it looks, right? So we have 10 simple rules. Um, and again, very quickly before we go into Q&A, reflect on belonging and repeat. And that's just, go back to the definition. Just like I said in the beginning, go back to the definition and really ask yourself if you're providing some of these things that are part of the definition. And some of y'all in the chat said, when the professor knew my name. So it's so important. And it's actually one of the rules that we talk about in this article. Be mindful of names, pronouns, and diverse identities. Getting someone's name right can do wonders. So investing that time is great. Be transparent about your expectations. Provide opportunities to learn about each other. We have we talk in rules 8 and 9 about kudos and equity checks, which I'm a big fan of. And so if you read through that article, you'll get all of the details. But I wanted to get this information over to y'all before our 30 minutes were up. Okay, so we have a few minutes for Q&A. So thank you all so much again for the participation in the chat and for listening to me today and taking away. I know with your jobs, it's just careers, it's just very hard to give 30 minutes. So thank you very much. Here is how to reach me. And if there are any questions, please share them with me.
I see a question that came through, Nidia, to us as panelists. It says, is there any research specifically to undocumented students? I coordinate our Dream Resource Center at a community college.
Oops, I was muted. Yes, there is. So off the top of my head, I can think of some scholars that do work with undocumented students. For example, there is a faculty, Carola Suarez Orozco. But if you email me, I can send you some of those articles so that you can kind of see what is being done in that realm. But yes, there's definitely research on that population.
This has been so incredible. Yes, to everybody who's asking, we will be sending out a recording of this presentation along with the articles mentioned, so you'll have all this information. Did you do any further research for adult learners?
Yes, so I am an affiliate of OCCRL at the University of Illinois. OCCRL is the Office of Community College Research and Leadership. And there we do a lot of work on adult learners in terms of whether they are at 4 years or community colleges. We have a project right now looking at former foster youth as well that are in community colleges. So we do a lot of research on adult learners as well. So yeah, if you reach out to me, I can send you some of that stuff.
And then Edwin asked, is there a way to talk with parents on how to help their students find belonging?
I think so, and especially among families who are maybe more interdependent or collectivistic, or from cultural groups that are more interdependent, families are a great source of sense of college belonging. And so there's a lot of ways that you can do that, and there are some articles and some posts, so I can also send those along about that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. And I did want to share, let me just put up my screen really quickly. If you are interested in learning more about how you can foster a sense of belonging among college students, this is one of the topics that we cover in our curriculum at Youth Thrive Educational Services by the amazing Dr. Nidia Ruedas-Gracia. We are hosting an informational webinar tomorrow at the same time as today. I will drop a link in the chat to anybody that wants to come and learn a little bit more information. But thank you for your time, and we hope to see you tomorrow or at our future events. So let me just drop that in the chat for you now, and then we will see you hopefully at other events.
Yes, thank you all so much. And just reach out to me. I can answer. I know there were a lot more questions in the chat. So send me an email and I'll get back to you. Yes.
Thanks so much, everybody.